do you know Oliver Sacks? Do you know his writing? Neurologist? And what some have called a poet of science. He writes wonderful essays and books about the ways that our minds sometimes don't work as they should, but also the beauty of the processes of our minds. One of my favorite books, I believe the whole book is called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. You heard of that one? Yeah, and it is actually a psychological phenomenon, an illness that this man had who he believed that his wife was a hat. It was not fascinating. Anyway, not what I'm planning to talk about tonight. But Oliver Sacks, I read an essay about an essay that Oliver Sacks had written. And I thought it was really wonderful to think about it in terms of our Torah portion this week. We're reading about Noah. Everybody knows the story of Noah, but I'll tell you a little bit. The beginning of the story of Noah, we learn that the world has just gone to hell in a handbasket, right? It is just a hot mess, the whole world. And so God says to Noah, build me an ark, right? Build me an ark. God tells Noah to do a specific thing in a specific way. And Noah does it. He does that thing exactly as he is told to do it. And then he takes those pairs of animals onto the ark, and they spend about 40 days in one accounting and even longer in another accounting. And when they get off the ark, finally, as the floodwaters have receded, what we have in the world is the possibility of a brand new world. Of a world that isn't going to be exactly as the old one was, a wretched place, a place where nothing is good. So this essay that I read, which is called Oliver Sacks on the 3 essential elements of creativity, really resonated with me in terms of that story of Noah. Because as he uncovers them, thinking about the way that our minds, so mysterious, often work, he points to 3 stages in that kind of creativity that creates the world anew. He points to, first, imitation. Doing it exactly the way someone else did it. Now, Mark Twain is supposed to have said, don't ever imitate anybody. But, forgive me, that was actually Hemingway. Mark Twain said something else later in the article. Hemingway said, don't ever imitate anyone. And of course, he's fooling himself if he thinks that he himself never imitated anyone. The beginning of creativity is imitation. As children, we learn by doing what other people are doing, by watching carefully and then doing it. I remember when my kids, little toddlery kids, would walk around like this, with nothing in their hands, talking. They didn't know what they were doing, they didn't know what they were saying, but they were doing what they were seeing me do in their world, imitating. And then I'll skip to the second part, which is mastering that which you imitated. Right? Doing that thing so many times that you're actually good at it. You become a master of the thing that you were doing, and in there is some shifting. You're creating something, but not that kind of creativity that takes us to a new world, or the possibility of a new world. And so the third thing is actually the place that I think is most interesting in terms of our story, and that is doing nothing. You're good at that? Yeah. Having imitated it, having practiced, creativity, the kind that is world-altering, the kind that a Hemingway or a Mark Twain or a Mozart or a Picasso creates, requires a period of not doing, of nothing. In fact, maybe even of forgetting. Oliver Sacks talks about his book, Awakenings. You may have seen a movie based on that book with Robin Williams in it. It's a wonderful movie. And he talks about that just after publishing the book, he got a manuscript of a play from a playwright based on his book. And the playwright said, I read your book and I immediately sat down and had to write this play. It poured forth from me. And Sacks hated the play. He thought it was terrible. That the playwright had just grabbed whole chunks of what he had written in the book and put it into the mouth of one of the characters in the play. But then he received another script later. And that script came from Harold Pinter, the incredible playwright. In 1982, he says, I received an unexpected packet from London containing a letter from Harold Pinter and the manuscript of a new play called A Kind of Alaska, which he said he had been inspired by a case history of mine in Awakenings. Now, Sachs's book came out in 1973. And in 1982, he received the manuscript of the play. And Harold Pinter says in his letter to Oliver Sacks that he was so inspired by Sachs's book that he immediately began to write a play. And then, nothing. The play wouldn't come. He sat to write and could not create anything. And so he put it aside. Like so many other beginnings of stories and plays and musical compositions that people who are creative create, he just put it to one side and he literally forgot about it. Until one night, in the midst of a dream, he awoke. And the first words of the play, "Something is happening," were on his lips as he woke up. And the play then wrote itself in the days and weeks that followed. And Oliver Sacks says, contrary to the first manuscript, which he hated, Pinter's play spoke volumes to him. He had written the book on which it was based, but it brought into his consciousness an entirely new understanding of the story that he had originally told. It created, in a real sense, a new world from the world that he had begun. And so we come back to the story of Noah and we find that Noah, probably unwittingly, is an agent of incredible creative change. First, he does as he is told. God says do, he does. And it doesn't happen overnight. It actually takes him a really long time, says the Midrash, to build the ark. And by the end of that process, we imagine, he might have become a master of his craft by doing and doing and doing. But it is those 40 days of nothing that ultimately allow Noah to be the creator of that new beginning, that new world of possibility. How do we find in our lives periods of nothing? It is a very busy world that we live in. I imagine that few of us have more than a couple of minutes of nothing on any given day or in any given week. Nothing. Without phone, without TV, without computer, without a book, without music. And yet, our creative minds require the nothing, says Oliver Sacks. The periods of forgetting, if we are going to create in the way that each of us is capable of creating. I would submit to you, my friends, that Shabbat can be a period of nothing for us in our lives on a regular basis, if we choose to let it be. Maybe it's not the full 24-hour period, but maybe if it were built into our lives, it could be the place of rebirth for us, a time where we are not required to work, to produce, or even to be entertained, but simply to be. Try it out. Let me know what you create. Shabbat Shalom.